Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
We are back with the Honorable Dr. Grant Venerable, who has an amazing past, history, and future ahead of him. He's here as a chemist, as a professor, as a doctor, and again, to talk about, unsure of the topic today, we're going to get to that, but with all the experience under his belt, we've been talking a lot about life stories and, lessons learned throughout their years. Congratulations on being our Professional of the Year, Grant, and welcome back today. For those new timers, tell us a little bit about yourself. Thank you.
Well, I go way back to coming into life in Los Angeles back during World War II, incredibly enough, after the third term of Franklin D. Roosevelt, which it sounds unreal to even say those words, but it's true. And it's given me a real platform to observe the world from, because I probably had a whole different viewpoint of the world. In fact, as I was waking up this morning and thinking of things I might talk about, the general thought of how we use labels, and I want you to think about clothing labels.
Yep, okay.
How we use labels to create our realities. And I think that's probably a good analogy to make.
Yeah.
Because depending upon our class, our, socioeconomic class, labels mean different things to different people.
Do.
And if you're in the for brackets of what down south we call high cotton, then clothing labels become pretty important, where you have a suit, you have a dress, whatever it is you're wearing, and I have this is the latest Givenchy, this is the latest this and that, and that's supposed to place you in a certain reality, but it's only the external reality, and the deeper you get inside of labels, beneath labels, the more clear it gets as to how we reached where we are today in the world, in the good old United States of America, where I'm not trying to be confrontational to the news media, but it is a congregation of different media, but the social media has become prominent and really outranking the network, the traditional network media. And because it's so available to people, it has been utilized and believed in. Because whatever we see on that screen or whatever we hear, it begins to shape our reality.
Sure does.
And the way that it does that, I realize, is its utilization of labels. And the labels become a language beyond English, a language beyond speaking English in our world, a language beyond writing in English. It's mind-boggled everybody.
Yeah.
And I think we should probably declare a national holiday from labels. Use of labels we'll start with an hour, start with a day, start with a week or a month, and look at the difference. Because I think we would discover, when I say I think, I think, us 8 billion human beings would discover something almost incredible, is that we individually create our own reality. And that's what can be sometimes difficult to stomach or difficult to take. But on the other hand, it's a great, glorious thing to realize that we have that much personal power. But if we use it right, it comes out the way I experienced last Sunday night when I had a marvelous reaction to the sunset here in Yucca Valley. 2,000 feet elevation. There's a big national park called Joshua Tree National Monument. It's this cluster of beautiful desert mountains between Yucca Valley and Palm Springs, California. And of course, Palm Springs is a city that's practically at sea level, maybe only 100 feet above sea level. But Yucca Valley is about 2,000 feet above sea level. And these mountains of Joshua Tree, whose peaks can get up to almost 5,000 feet in elevation, are just like little impressions that come up out of our 2,000 foot valley plateau.
Yeah.
Now, what I've been able to realize from here, getting away from an urban setting like Atlanta, Georgia, and returning to my Southern California place of origination, it has brought some amazing revelations just in the last 5 months of being here. Things I didn't expect. And one thing I did not expect was the sunset.
Yeah.
Of the 21st of September, and the insights that I was getting. It was like just a whole new opening about things like labels.
Yeah.
And then I began to list all of the labels that are now so commonplace, we don't notice them. And let's talk about political labels without necessarily getting into
I know
itself. But it's the key there. We address our political agreements and disagreements through labels of liberal and conservative. And what the heck do those mean? Nobody knows anymore what they really mean.
Yeah.
They're whatever the label issuers want them to mean. And they're different from when I was born. They're different from when I was a little kid. They're different from when I was in junior high school and college. And it was a difference that made perhaps for greater clarity in communication, because people did not go off on each other about differences of labels. Now, I've looked at where did that come from? And sometimes I get different answers here, but I think everyone has their own answers if you've been around for at least 10 years or something like that. But a line was crossed, and people began to identify labels as the reality. And then the use of the labels created a reality that matched the labels. So liberals started to go off on conservatives. Conservatives started to go off on liberals. But there's other things. Back in the 50s, the favorite labels to go off on was communism, socialism. And if you were on the wrong side of that got pretty serious. People lost jobs in the Senator Joseph McCarthy hearings, who made his career out of throwing labels on people and then getting people to report on who was one label and another was, do you know communists? So prominent people, even scientists, were called into Washington, D.C. to talk about their friends. Do you have friends who are communists?
Yeah, right.
It could be dangerous to say, yes, you have communist friends. Well, it was a big deal in that day because communism was a recent force in the world since the Russian Revolution of 1917. And then it took a life of its own, where the communist strategies that came out of Moscow were really designed to, well, how can we take greater prominence in this world? Well, we take certain positions, and positions of people in the United States that seem similar would be slandered as communists. And of course, that wasn't necessarily so. But a big word that was important in the 50s was integration and segregation. But what is that? People practically forgotten about that. But it referred to racial segregation of the races in the United States following slavery. Now there's a big deal about slavery. It's become a label. We can't talk about slavery anymore because slavery makes some people feel guilty. I don't know why that's true, but it makes other people feel bad. But we've had different slaveries or the equivalents in the world for thousands of years. But the recent version started back in the really the 1600s. And 1492 is a good date to look at for Western civilization. That's when Columbus made the voyage to the New World, thought he was going to wind up in India. And so he thought that the Native Americans he met in the islands where Haiti is now and Puerto Rico is now, and that he was in India. And he thought these were Indians around him. So I digress. But that's where the first labels really came from. And they went back and reported dutifully to Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand of Spain, who were like the Catholic overseers of the Western world. And then things just unfolded from there. I talked a little about how labels played a role in justifying slavery.
Yeah.
But I also talked about the previous forms of servitude in the world, which went back thousands of years to biblical times and before. And there were people who became the rewards of conquering your neighbors in the next territory. And you would take in people into your country. But these people actually became citizens of the countries they were taken into. They became members of the families in those countries that captured so-called slaves. Then things changed. Somewhere in the 1600s, when there became a label, a color motive to slavery. Now, the Irish were the first to have the honor to be put into some kind of bondage. I say that loosely, of course. It was no honor to be a bonded servant. But Irish people were taken from Ireland. They had debts to pay off in Ireland. And so they were sent to the New World of America, the American colonies, to pay off their debts. So they signed up to be indentured servants for a period of time. And that happened most of the 1600s. But it became a tricky thing because the Irish were phenotypically similar to the English. What does that mean? It means they look basically alike. Their basic features were alike. Their hair was alike. Their complexions were alike. But they spoke different accents, so that did distinguish them. There was something called the Bacon Rebellion, that's centered in Virginia, the state of Virginia, in which Indians and Irish and black folk who had been brought, not as slaves yet, but they became indentured servants.
Yeah.
There was some distinction. Some were actually enslaved, but many were indentured servants like the Irish. Okay, here's what happened. It turned out that the ruling economic people in the colonies, from down in Georgia all the way up to up Massachusetts,
Mm-hmm.
New York, Pennsylvania, and they made an agreement and said, "Look, let's get real about this.
Mm-hmm.
We can't tell the Irish, but
Nope.
looking at them, they look like we do, the English. So let's kind of change our focus from the Irish." And many very not diversive, but divisive things had been developed to keep the Irish under their feet. And one was through caricatures, drawing these horrible looking caricatures comparing Irish to primates, chimpanzees, gorillas, putting those well, that was patently ridiculous because they didn't really look that way. They looked English. So the decision got made. Let's not stress ourselves out.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look who we got right now. The Irish can change sides whenever they want. They can blend into our population of the
Yeah.
English, the British, the Scots. But there is one population here, the blacks from Africa. They have a permanent trait that they cannot change and we can't change. So let's use it by golly. And that will be the code, the marker. So let's take them into servitude and apply some pretty strict rules about it. And that started in the early 1700s, a fresh slate. And it became a certain structure, but it was a pretty brutal thing at times. You could call it a huge inconvenience for the black folk who were involved in that. But the 1700s set some patterns. They set patterns for people who became my family, who were descendants of those slaves. And it became a very complex situation. But also the signs of freedom and protecting your freedom also appeared in the late 1700s as the American colonists were realizing they wanted no more bondage to the British. And said, we're getting taxed, so let's throw some crates of tea into the Boston Harbor to symbolize our objection for being taxed and told that we had to buy the tea and other things that our colonial rulers had for us to do. So that sparked freedom, the whole view of freedom, this idea of individual freedom, which wound up in the Declaration of Independence. If anything, the Declaration is a more fundamental document to the founding of this wonderful place called America. It also inspired the black slaves. Well, that looks pretty good. I think we could use a little of that. We think we could use some of that too. So that spirit came out of Philadelphia under William Penn.
Okay.
Who, it was in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Penn's Wood. Let's see, Pennsylvania. And there was a square mile of different church and synagogue and Islamic denominations there in the center of Philadelphia. And there were the Methodists, the Episcopalians, the Roman Catholics, the Presbyterians, the Quakers, my goodness, especially the Quakers and others. So they were there in close communion, and that's how the African Methodist Episcopal Church was formed, right there in Philadelphia.
Wow.
And that was the church my parents belonged to as it evolved into the 1900s during World War I. Well, since then, labels have had plenty of time to develop, and it was used to maintain the status quo that the rulers wanted to maintain. So even though Abraham Lincoln had this Emancipation Proclamation that released people from slavery, but in Texas, they didn't announce it. And so people were kept as slave servants past even the end of the Civil War, until someone said, don't you think we should tell those folks that they're free? So this Union colonel went down there and said, y'all is free. And people looked at each other and said, oh my goodness, we're free. What are we going to do? And so they had a celebration called June 19th, 1865, shortened to Juneteenth. One of the most interesting facets of American history. Now, there were different kinds of emancipation, and my family had the advantage of having one of those kinds of emancipation. What happened created the patterns leading up to today. So it seems to me that labels are used now to try to divide the American population so that one small group of people can go back to the good old days during slavery. And I'll just put it like that, just to put it with a little bit of humor, but yet it ain't funny. It's true. So today, I think is like a final showdown. Are we going to get over the Civil War or not? And that's why I'm so gratified to have lived in the state of Georgia for 26 years before returning to California. Because it gave me a chance to have friendships with neighbors who were descended from the old days prior to the Civil War. And it was an opportunity for me to understand that there was only one race that was from another kind of way to reach that view. The people in the deep south of this country are basically one people. And many of them have not figured that out yet. They have the same basic religious impulses, the same religions. They sing the same hymns. They hear the same sermons. And they have the same attitudes toward life. And outsiders to the South. Now, we used to hear a lot in the 1950s on television, like the Southerners resisting racial segregation blamed it on Northerners, Yankees, imposing their views on Southerners. And they'd say, you Yankees, go home. You're messing up. This is our country, our territory. You go home. Well, it turns out that the people of color felt the same way. And in the early civil rights movement, which was populated by many folks from the North, were told by the Black Southerners, now you go home. This is our country. Now, we want to control our territory. Well, all of that engaged in one big chemical process, you might call it, And that's where I really get interested, because
Passionate. Yep.
I look at the laws of chemistry. I look at how they operate to change one group of substances into another group.
Mm-hmm.
The same atoms, but they're arranged together in a different way. That's taking place in the Deep South. The same people. And people, they sometimes think they're different because they look different, or their skin complexions are different.
Mm-hmm.
But the unity is in the fact not of the color of the skin, but the fact that they all have skin.
Yeah.
No matter what color it is. They all have the bodily features that all human beings share. They have the mental, emotional attitudes that all human beings share. All have the capacity to be joyful and happy. All have the capacity to be angry and enraged. So all these attributes came together in the South and created like a new culture.
Got it. Wow. Well, this is fascinating to think about, and I just want people to realize and understand. Grant Venerable, our podcast, of course, Business Professional of the Year. He's with us, joining us as a doctor, as a chemist, as an influencer, as a lecturer, my goodness, philosopher, philanthropist. He does it all. And this is another great conversation you bring up today. So thank you for that. Let's continue the conversation. Thank you.
Let's come up with address a question you
Sure.
asked.
Go ahead.
Who were the people a long time ago that I referred to as anthropologists? Anthropo, and with a logi. And that means the science of humankind, the study of humankind.
Yeah.
So who was it that changed the labels? Who changed the terms of the game of life in America and in Europe? But it started in Europe. It started with, how do we justify the slave trade? How do we justify the taking of people from Africa and plunking them down into South America, Central America, Mexico, United States, Canada? And we justify it on a religious basis, and we justify it on an anthropological basis. And who were these anthropologists? They were people like Johann Johann Friedrich Blumenbach, who defined what races are. He had, I think, 4 or 5 races that he divided humanity into. And there was a group, the Asian group, there was the European group, and there were subgroups of that. Northerners, Southern Europeans, Eastern Europeans, Russian Europeans. There were Americans, Native Americans. There were Africans, Asians. They assigned traits. Blumenbach assigned certain traits. But to the Africans, he gave a great deal of energy to creativity, to say, well, look at their cranial shapes, their cranial sizes, the skull, and look at the difference in their skin colors. Look at their hair types. Look at the facial features. And they must be the lowest of all of the races in the world because they are the dullest intellectually. Well, the first time I went to Africa was on almost the 45th anniversary of the founding of the Ghana, which was the Gold Coast. And I had a chance to have a similar experience of being an American who grew up in America, had never been around Africans that close in their native land before. And that was an eye-opener. It was revealing. The Africans themselves, particularly in Ghana, did not even notice skin color. They didn't notice each other's skin color. I think the only skin color, in fact, in a way they noticed was the missionaries who came to introduce them to Christianity to make them a worthy people to share the earth with the Europeans who wanted to own them and gain their labor. So they wanted to make them Christians to help calm them down and make them tame and malleable to do their bidding. But the more powerful thing came from the anthropologists when they developed this pole. I call it a totem pole, and the pole had these 5 or 6 different divisions on it, and the top division were the superior people, and they had the lightest skin colors and the most aquiline cranial shapes. And then down below that were other races, perhaps the Mediterranean and the South American races, and then all the way down through the Asian and to the bottom to the African races. And it seemed to do the job that the wealthy bourgeois of Europe wanted done. The royalty of Europe wanted done. The United States did develop a different kind of a culture. I think we're still developing it, and I think we're going to see a lot of movement in that direction in the next very few years, actually. But there were other people too, besides Johann Friedrich Blumenbach. There was Linnaeus, the Swedish anthropologist. There was Boas, who was an American. He was a professor at Columbia. There was and there were other people. I'm not. Their names are not right in front of me, but they came up with basically the same ideas about the inferiority, superiority of different races relative to one another. So that's what I was trying to answer a couple of weeks ago to enlighten us on that point. But things went further. I became part of the cultural ethnic studies faculty after serving in Silicon Valley industry, and that was after serving as a professor of chemistry in the California campuses like Cal Poly and Santa Cruz. But I'd say Silicon Valley really contributed a lot to my intellectual development. And I became a spokesman for the arts and humanities, not because I made an application to be, but I had friends who were art teachers, who were artists in California, who had founded a group called the California Alliance for Arts Education. And they said, well, Grant, you have a lot of deep thinking about the unity of how people operate intellectually. We'd like you to join us, really, on the board of directors of the CAAE, California Alliance for Arts Education.
Thank you.
And I was like, the Silicon Valley was different from traditional American industry. The buildings of Silicon Valley were largely no more than 2 stories. So that meant that was different from the San Francisco traditional corporations that had skyscrapers. And who had the offices at the top? The board of directors, the president, the executive officers. And there was an elevator that went down to the lower floors, to the lower ranking members of the corporation. Well, it was places like Hewlett Packard, HP, and my corporation, which really an Eastern corporation that bought into Silicon
Wow.
Valley, Motorola. They turned it around. They flattened the buildings.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so when lunchtime, everyone had lunch in the same cafeteria. So there was the CEO. Went on a visit to see friends at HP. This was back in 1986. And they pointed, see that table there by the door? That's John Young, the CEO of Hewlett Packard, HP. And he succeeded Hewlett and Packard as who actually ran HP. But that table was by the door for a reason. And it was easily accessible to any employee that was eating in that cafeteria. So if they had a comment about the corporation, they could just drop to the table and express their views to the senior executive people eating at that table. You can imagine it made for a whole different kind of a culture corporately. Also, it was different in the way it treated its customers. It wanted its customers to have the best in customer service. So they polled their customers on a regular basis. Does this computer meet your standards? Does it meet your desires in a computer? That was the middle of the 1980s. That attitude was general in the industry. Students at Stanford University and UC Berkeley were trained to join in that kind of attitude of customer service and quality of products and services. Now, guess what happened toward the late 90s
What?
and the early 2000s? The industry in Silicon Valley rather lost its way.
Yeah.
They lost connection to the elders. And I refer to Steve Jobs as an elder, although he was in his 20s when he founded Apple Computer.
Oh my gosh.
Bill Gates, same age as Steve Jobs. They were born within months of each other.
Wow.
They became two of the wealthiest men.
I know, right?
In industry, high-tech industry. But that valley, it changed. I think as the venture capitalists got more prevalent and prominent in Silicon Valley industry, and that included all the way up to San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose, even down to Los Angeles, and how computers were put together. And then there was this change. The corporate people found they could make even more money.
Wow. Yep.
If they cut down the budget
Yep.
for customer service. In fact, they could make even more if they stopped talking to the customers. I think everyone by now in this country has figured that out. I certainly did within just a very few years ago. You try to pick up the phone and call any of those companies, good luck.
Yeah, right.
They don't want to talk to you because to maintain people to answer phones takes away from the profit margin that they have enjoyed, and therefore they do not keep touch with the spirits of that valley. Bill Gates is still around, but he sold out his company to somebody from another culture who don't have the same views. In fact, they have a system that treats people a certain way in their country. And it seems to me just imported that system into the modern day, whatever that company is that Bill Gates let go of. So I won't say any more than that right now, but I think everyone in this country who owns a PC knows what I'm talking about and who I'm talking about. Um, and that's how we have the political situation we have today, because those new corporate people
Yeah.
began to get a Supreme Court
True.
who would rule the way they wanted them to rule, that they could give gobs of money
Yep.
to people running for office and don't have to reveal it.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're here today. So welcome to our world today. Now, is there anyone, did you put out the call for callers?
Nope. The line is
interested?
open, 631-307-4010. The lines are open still. Yep, 631-307-4010.
But-
Continue, please, darling.
But I know I put out a lot there. And I think the order of the day is to wrap our arms around all of that, to see how we, I'm going to give one answer to that question. How do we get back and move to a higher version of the American dream, if I could put it so simply as that? And I think it's the only way we're going to make it through a time of budgetary uncertainty that was put there deliberately, that we're uncertain. So everyone who gets Social Security retirement checks like me and many others, it's a constant question of, are we going to get a check next month? And it's a good question. But yet, the answers are swirling around us, and it goes back to my first question. And the first question is, how our labels have created our realities. And the instant answer to that is to stop using the labels. Stop circulating them around our brains and central nervous systems, souls and hearts. They're irrelevant to our well-being. The word of the day, I'm going to say it, is empathy with other people. It's community, first of all, with our own families, and then the neighborhoods that we live in. Now the neighborhoods are even online. And it's about, how do we take care of our families? And I'm seeing a great example of that right now, because there's been shifts, there's been changes. And you asked the question, Jill, where do we go after death? And my family right now is dealing with that. Because where did one of my best cousins go, who's in my same age bracket? And that was a guy he's had a tough life, but a very rewarding life. And it was right at the time I was dealing with the sunset of a week ago that I learned of his passing in Washington, D.C. And one of his sons was reaching out to me to keep me up on the nature of his passing. The whole family is still in a grieving, mourning state, but yet it's a joyful state because of how they're handling it in terms of, okay, we've got to come up with a memorial service in a couple of weeks. How do we do that? How do we celebrate this man? But even more interesting for our audience is how I, as what many Americans would call a distant cousin, how we managed to become so deeply involved in each other's lives, as though we were brothers and sisters and nephews and nieces and uncles and aunts. And that too, it's a small story, but it's powerful. My mother is related to that family. That family was descended from a woman who was my mother's oldest first cousin, born in 1895. My mother was one of the younger first cousins, born in 1916.
Mm-hmm.
My mother, through her husband, my father, was asked to go to Portland, Maine in 1947 to be a midwife for my father's niece, who was almost ready to give birth to her first son in Portland, Maine. So my mother took this great train called the Santa Fe Chief, went to Chicago, and went from there on the New York Central into Portland, Maine. Helped her niece, my father's niece, to have her first child, who became in life a top-ranking naval seaman who fathered several children and grandfathered children. Well, part of the story, the simultaneity of it is he just passed away in the last 2 to 3 weeks. So there was a simultaneity there. But what happened on the way back on the train? My mother stopped in Chicago to spend a week with her relatives, that is, her cousin's family. And there was a new child in that family. And that child was only about 2 years old.
Yeah.
And when my mother took one look at him, she said, "He looks just like my son, Grant." But they did not meet Grant for many years. However, my mother was quite taken. The word spread throughout the whole family of extended family cousins that there were these two young, well, they were young kids. Well, one was 2 and the other was like 5. That they looked so much alike they could be twin brothers. So I didn't meet that twin brother until 1963 when they went through LA. And then I went through Chicago in 64 and stayed with them. That connection is how I got in to the University of Chicago. That twin cousin himself, I helped get into the University of Chicago years later in the MBA program, through which he developed a very wonderful career as an accountant, a super accountant who solved companies' financial problems just like that. So all those stories kind of mesh together with what I'm saying about the import of community, starting right there with family community. And you don't have to go far to deal with that. You go wherever your kinfolk live, and being more available with your empathy in terms of making the children in those families successful, to be there as a guide, as a counselor, which I've done for this cousin's family. So that's really the message today as we get beyond clothing labels.
Yeah.
And they're surrogate labels. Our only label is human. And as we get back to that, the world's going to change in an instant to the way we need it to be. So what comes up for you, Jill? Does anything, I know some things come up, but what comes up?
A lot come up. My goodness, my mind wanders in good directions, because you're making me think about so much, every conversation we have. And by the way, there's still 4 minutes left. If someone does want to call 631-307-4010, just know the lines are open. But Grant, I mean, You've seen so much in your world, in your lifetime, with what you dealt with as a child and growing up, how you did, where you did, and then to have your elders and your father. I mean, again, he was the original Grant, or he's the second. You're the third Grant.
He was the second
So
Grant.
you were the third. Okay, that's what I was
I'm the
trying to
third
remember.
Grant. His father was named Beverly Grant Venerable.
Okay.
You don't
Hmm.
hear that name for boys much anymore.
No,
But there
no.
were some very fabulous people in England who were named Beverly. And my
Oh,
grandfather in the United States was one of those.
wow.
And then I became Grant the second
Grant the
after Grant D the first.
Wow. Well, let me ask. I mean, in your time, in your world, in your career, what do you see that has changed the most, would you say, for the benefit of all mankind? What do you realize the evolution of us, of people,
Oh
and how
boy.
we treat others and how we act and how we grow and how we what have you seen something that's positive, would you say, in your time of, being in the field you are, something really that excites you that has changed?
I would say first in the field of science, the field of astronomy. From the day the Mount Palomar telescope was dedicated in 1948, there were 900 people there from all over the world, special guests seated under the dome of that observatory, which you can practically see from Yucca Valley if you get high enough. It's maybe 100 or so miles from the Yucca Valley. But that advanced astronomy and the human understanding of the universe, probably more than anything, maybe even after the atomic bomb, which came just a few years before that telescope. Well,
Hmm.
the atomic bomb was an awful thing, but it left us with a powerful, wonderful legacy of understanding atoms and molecules, which is the field I went into. Then the second thing I would say was the field of civil rights.
Yeah.
When people began to change their whole views of one
Hmm.
another based upon the race label,
Yeah.
I would say maybe the symbols of that were so
Hmm.
important were Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., and Malcolm X.
Yeah.
And we were a King family. We knew the Kings. We met the Kings at Caltech in 1958 when they came to be honored for
Wow.
the Montgomery bus boycott and solving that thing, integrating the
Hmm.
buses of Montgomery, Alabama. And I got to talk to Reverend King. I was a
Wow.
little 15-year-old, a diminutive teenager, but that influenced me greatly just to have met this great man, and then great presidents who seemed to revolve around King. No matter what people thought politically of Dwight Eisenhower or Lyndon Johnson or John Kennedy or Richard Nixon, they had a very pivotal role to play in this country. And for all of the negatives around all those presidents, each one had significant positives that everyone was able to agree on. And then we skip from there,
Yeah.
uh, uh, maybe to Silicon Valley,
Hmm.
the role of Silicon Valley,
Wow.
and from that I think we're here now.
Amazing.
I think we're facing such they
Ah.
look like crises.
Yeah.
Personally, Grant does not agree to see them as crises
Hmm.
because there's no crisis he's had that he could not solve.
Wow.
So
Oh,
I think those four things.
great. Well, thank you. Unfortunately, we are out of time, and sorry we didn't get any callers today, but hopefully next time, Grant, let's remind everyone how we can contact you, please. Thank you.
Okay. Grant D. Venerable, PhD.
Yep.
.com,
Mm-hmm.
all lowercase. VENTWO at AOL.com. That's my email. But one more thing is, I do know this about people who hear me. They get so entranced with what I'm saying.
The word,
it takes them a little while to even think of all the questions they want to ask. And that's okay. Because whenever they do ask, they're good. So.
Well, thank you again for being here, for joining us, and have a fantastic day, Grant. Always a pleasure having you here. And again, congratulations on being our Professional of the Year. Love having you as always. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Hi, this is Terry Crews, actor, former football player, game show host, father of 5, and all-around big dude. I'm also an expert on drama. I know all kinds of drama. There's the good kind that comes with having a house full of kids. There's the bad kind, like season-ending injuries. There's the necessary kind, like having an agent in Hollywood. And there's silly drama, like the drama around my percolating pectorals. And then there's the drama you can skip.
Skip the drama that comes with not having your high school diploma or equivalency. Find free adult education classes near you and finish your high school diploma. Visit finishyourdiploma.org.
Or text diploma to 97779. Message and data rates may apply. Reply STOP to opt out. That's diploma to 97779. And leave the drama to actors like me.
Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.